Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in again to the Marketing Detective. We got some really great news 2 weeks ago as we have won a Telly Award in marketing and advertising and education for the Marketing Detective. So you are listening to an award-winning podcast as of now, and thank you again for tuning in. Our topic today is automotive. We've discussed this some 9 months ago, and now we've got some good news and some bad news that we're going to be sharing today about the automotive industry. The good news is the pent-up demand is amazing. Automotive sales are way up. The bad news is the chips that are available in the vehicles are not available. So our focus today on the Marketing Detective, we're going to solve the mystery around hurry up, make those chips. My guest today is a gentleman by the name of Mike Apple, and Mike has over 30 years experience in the automotive industry. He has worked with automotive dealers from the agency perspective all the way down to the local sales dealerships in the markets. And he brings with him a wealth of information. I actually was visiting with him in Kansas City a few weeks ago during my market visit, where he is currently with Fox 4 in Kansas City as the automotive sales specialist. He is the local expert in automotive in the Kansas market. Mike, can you share a little bit about your experience with Ford, the old J. Walter Thompson, and then, of course, the GTB brand?
Sure, and thank you for having me today, Mitch. I appreciate it, and it's always good to be on an award-winning program. I guess I should say congratulations on your telly. That's fantastic. My career started quite a few years ago. I joined J. Walter Thompson advertising agency. I actually first began my career working on the United States Marine Corps account out of Washington, D.C. and the New York office. I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and then I made a career change and went over to the automotive side, where I worked on the Ford division account for different brands, and then eventually went into the retail side of it, where I worked with the Ford dealer advertising groups throughout the country. At one time, I was able to head up the entire organization nationally with the Ford dealer group, and that was out of Detroit. So in that, let's just say 30 plus years, I was able to work on not only the OEM side, the manufacturing side, where we worked on brands. Ford developed a regional marketing program, which I headed up for about 4 years, and then went with the retail group nationally and worked in actually 10 different markets throughout my career. Los Angeles and Denver and Detroit and Dallas and a few others. So my background is both automotive branding and actually most of it automotive retailing on the tier 2 side. So it's been both, and it's been incredibly enjoyable and quite the learning experience.
Well, listen, not only have you learned, but you have been an incredible teacher to people like me, who you have to explain it to me like a fifth grader about the manufacturing pitfalls and all the things. But the other thing I want to say about you, Mike, is, Mike, you're an absolute legend in the automotive industry. I have not talked to a single person that knows you that does not have the ultimate respect for you and really thinks you are an incredible asset to the dealerships that you work with. So that is a compliment, and that you can pay me, Venmo me after this for that. But you bring to us some incredible insight and some incredible credibility. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about this. How did we get to this situation where we are missing these chips? And let me just, for our audience, understand what these are. The chips in the vehicles, and I was under the misconception, and I was quickly corrected by Mike, that it's not one chip per car. It's hundreds of chips, up to over 500 chips that manage things like cruise control and the stereo system and the navigation, All of these chips have to be in place. And unfortunately, we hit a chip manufacturing deficit during COVID-19. Mike, can you share with us some of your insight of what led us to where we are today with those chips?
Sure, Mitch. Well, what happened was once the pandemic hit the United States and the world, for that matter, um, everybody sort of saw a little doom and gloom, justifiably so. So a lot of companies had to pivot, so to speak, and figure out how they were going to manage this process. And the manufacturers quickly shut down some plants because they didn't believe that there was going to be any demand for autos. Some plants made masks, some plants made resuscitators, some plants went into some ancillary things for the medical industry for COVID. And what happened is when those plants shut down, obviously, everything that had to be ordered wasn't ordered, like microchips. So when the plants shut down, unfortunately, the demand continued. There may have been, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks where the demand for vehicles was almost non-existent because people were trying to figure out what exactly this pandemic, how is it going to affect us? Well, the demand quickly got back to where it was, and it continued. Unfortunately, when you don't order things like microchips that have to go into a vehicle, 100 or maybe 200, that's a slow process. You don't just push a button and say, okay, we've got a couple million chips coming your way. Microchips, that technology is complex. So unfortunately, they got behind the 8 ball. If they shut a plant down for 60 or 90 or 120 days, those chips weren't being ordered. Chip manufacturers weren't making them.
And
So
Mike, and where are those chips being manufactured primarily?
primarily overseas, China, Japan. Obviously, we manufacture some chips here in this country, but most of them are overseas, which of course leads to other problems as well. But you can understand how all of a sudden the demand is high, so the plants are going to open up again, but they don't have those chips to insert into the vehicle. So it's a problem, and that's kind of how we got here. It's a slow process manufacturing chips, and every time you talk to a dealer or you talk to a manufacturer, what is the timeline? When are we going to get those chips back to the manufacturing plants? Well, you get a different answer every time you ask the question. We were out making some dealer calls today. We asked the question to 3 different dealers, and we got 3 different answers.
Wow.
I think a lot of it depends on the OEM. Is it Ford? Is it Toyota? Is it Kia? Is it Mitsubishi? And I think depending on who that OEM is, maybe that timeline might change a little bit.
And one of the dealer groups that will really hit the hardest was Ford,
Right.
in particular the F-150. Can you speak a little bit to that shortage? And on the screen right now, there's a stat that came out a couple of weeks ago, the estimated number of vehicles taken out of production due to microchip shortage as of May of 2021. So you can see the Ford F-Series really took the biggest hit. And of course, you had the Ford Explorer in there, the Ford Edge, and the Ford Escape. Let me ask a very elementary question. Why are there so many chips in those particular vehicles as opposed to some of the other OEMs?
Well, I think every vehicle requires about the same amount of chips, but depending on the production schedule, as you know, Ford has the best-selling pickup and has had for 40 years or more, and when you're at that volume, you're going to be hit the hardest. If you look at the chart and you could say, well, gosh, GM, Toyota, you go down to maybe Kia or Subaru or some of the other manufacturers, um, they're also hit hard. They just don't have that big volume. And when you take that, when you have that big volume in there, it's tough for the OEMs and really tough for the dealers. As you know, Ford is basically a truck manufacturer,
Yes.
and when you see the 150 or 200,000 vehicles being taken out of production, that really affects the dealer's bottom line. That's tough for the dealer to manage his day-to-day operation, knowing that he's not going to get those vehicles he desperately needs.
So, in other words, success is its own challenge for
Yes,
Ford and the volume.
yes, yes,
Thank
it
you,
is.
thank you for providing that clarification on it's not about the volume of the chips that need to go into vehicles, but really just the volume of vehicles that Ford
Right,
successfully sold
right.
over that period of time. So, with that said, and you mentioned that all the OEMs are giving you different answers. In a ballpark, are we talking 60 days? Are we talking 90 days? Are we talking 120 days? On average, where do you, and again, I know this is your opinion and based on data that you've seen, what is your best guess?
Well, I've talked to several of my associates that work on the manufacturing side, the OEM side, whether it's Ford or Chevy, and a few folks I know at Toyota. They're looking at probably around September or October for things to increase as far as the supply chain. Um, However, you can talk to other people in the industry, and they may give you a date as late as first quarter of next year, which is not something you want to hear if you're either a dealer or a manufacturer for that matter.
Or
So
a local television station selling advertising to automotive groups? Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. It's tough. I My associate and I were out today, and we pulled into a Nissan dealership, and you could count the cars in his lot, but we counted 10. And it was tough to just go into that dealership and see nothing there. It was
And that became a reality. I've been seeing this data, as you know. I study trends as a digital futurist. So I'm always looking at what's next, and we were seeing this data and information coming in over the last couple of months. But it hit home when I drove by a Toyota dealership around the block from my house, and I could count with two hands the number of new vehicles that were sitting on the lot. It almost looked like the lot was moving somewhere, and that they were just tearing down the office space inside. There were about 20 cars there, and so it really hit home. And not all dealerships are that bad off, and they have gotten very creative. Have you noticed how creative they've gotten to make the lots look like they're fuller by spacing the cars out more? So it's been interesting. So obviously we don't want to delve more into the gloom here. What should automotive dealers be doing today, Mike? Not having those chips in place, what should they be doing there? What advice can you give them?
Well, every dealer is going to manage his business as best he sees fit based on budget and inventory and all the things that go into the day-to-day operations. If I had a dealership now, obviously depending on what dealership it was, Ford, Chevy, Mitsubishi, whatever, I would want to stay relevant. Yes, we don't have a lot of vehicles to sell. Inventory is possibly all-time low. When are we going to get more vehicles? Good question. But in the meantime, stay relevant. Make sure your share of voice in the marketplace is at least at a level where people see your name and your brand, and what you're actually offering them today. Are you offering a service?
Mm,
Are you offering some pre-owned vehicles that have come in? It's just a matter of making sure that once the day comes when you've got a lot of vehicles, and I do believe that once vehicles start coming in, they're going to come in at a very rapid pace.
mm,
You already have that presence out there. Now, your share of voice is relevant with the consumer.
mm.
Yes, I'm aware of his dealership. I've seen his commercials. I know what he's offering me right now. I know what he was offering last month. So if there's if there's an incentive, then I would advertise it. If you do have vehicles, I would advertise that you have inventory.
Mm.
There's a lot of positive things you can do to counteract all of this negative publicity and obviously negative day-to-day operations of your dealership.
So one thing I wanted to touch on, and you mentioned it, the pre-owned inventory, that in itself has been a challenge around the country. I know as the dealerships are going to these auctions to buy the vehicles, one of the biggest competitors in that space right now are car rental companies trying to get those vehicles. Can you talk a little bit, give you some insight on that? And I know you're closely tied to that yourself personally.
Well, the car companies, the rental car companies, had a tough go. There's been some bankruptcies, and obviously they sold off a lot of their inventory out of need. I mean, you can't leave the 500 or 600 vehicles sitting in a lot forever. You've got to move those. You've got to rent them out, et cetera. So their best option at the time was to sell off vehicles.
Mm,
Well, now that travel's coming back, now that people are renting cars, the biggest problem is the Hertz and the Avis and the Budget and Enterprise, whoever it is, they're having a difficult time getting vehicles.
mm,
So they go to all of the uh, auctions or wherever they can to purchase vehicles, whether they're new or pre-owned, because they need those in their lot. So, a dealer may go to an auction and bid on a vehicle, and he gets outbid by, the representative there from Hertz who needed 10 vehicles.
mm.
And that's tough for a dealer to compete against someone who isn't buying a car to price right, make a little gross and sell it quickly.
Mm.
They're buying cars to keep in their lot and rent out on a month-to-month basis. Big difference there in a business model.
Well, and I will tell you firsthand, as I've traveled quite a bit. I just got back from Indianapolis. I was there before that, Chicago, before that, Kansas, before that, Mobile. I travel a lot. And one of the things that we discovered is how expensive the rental cars were. You used to be able to rent it for $30 a day. Now it's like $100 a day in order to rent those vehicles. So the demand is hitting the consumer pretty
It
hard
is. It
right
is.
now. So as we kind of wrap up this discussion, and thank you for the incredible insight that you have provided our audience today, I want to just get a little perspective here, a recap, if you will, of some things that I've kind of gleaned from you today, and kind of put a nice bow around our conversation. One of the things you had said is, when the plants shut down, they shut down for good reasons. They were doing it for masks, for respirators. They were trying to do what was in the best interest of the country. And unfortunately, that also created a huge setback. You had mentioned you can't just flip a switch and all of a sudden the manufacturing automatically comes back. And it's really going to depend on the OEMs, on when those are going to come back, depending on
Right.
the volume of sales that they have done, and how quickly their production's able to ramp up. As we know, Ford is one of the biggest challenged dealers. We're hoping that September and October at our best is going to be the increase based on your on the supply chain improvement. Hopefully, from your lips to God's ears, that's exactly where we are. Otherwise, worst case scenario is, and I heard this week from an auto dealer in Indy, is that they're afraid that it's going to be Q1 of 2022. I thought you provided some great insight for our local dealers, talking about what they do have to offer, if they have service, if they do have pre-owned vehicles they have available, but staying relevant in this space. You out of sight, out of mind. There's a whole army of consumers today that are buying vehicles, and maybe they are buying those vehicles today spec unseen. Maybe they don't have the product on the line, but they go ahead and get their order in, so they're not at the back of the line when all of a sudden the chips are there. So to stay relevant. And I really appreciated that share of voice that you think is important for each of the dealerships. And that really, I think, is going to be dependent on their volume. So
Right.
these bigger dealerships really need to be staying relevant in the space as best they can. Any final thoughts you'd like to share, Mike, with these auto dealers that are out there that are watching today, holding back tears?
Well, first of all, I being in the business as long as I have, and having so many friends that are dealers, I feel for them, because it's a tough situation they're in right now. Business has been very good for the car auto dealers, but these next 6 to 7 months are going to be incredibly challenging. And I can, as I go around and talk to all the dealers, we always say, look, broadcast is one of their best tools, maybe the best tool they have to get their message out there and get it out there to the masses. We always say, let us know what we can do for you. We've got the big pulpit. We can reach those people. Give us a message. Tell us what you want to say. What do you want to convey to consumer? Mm-hmm. There is a lot of demand for vehicles. There are people that need cars, and there are people that want cars. And right now, there's a pretty big supply of both. So whatever, as I say, whatever we can do, let us help you. Let us take you through a little bit of some past experience that I've been through and that other dealers have been through. And by the time the chip shortage is over and we look back at it and hope it never happens again, we'll be poised to move through the future and continue business the way we always have.
Oh, great advice. Thank you, Mike. And just having you talk us through it it eases my blood pressure a little bit. So you're like a channel blocker, if you will, to ease a little bit of that. So thank you for that fatherly advice that you're giving us. So Mike, if we have some audience members who want to find you, could you just share a couple of ways that we can find you?
Well, you can always reach me in my email, which is michael.apple@fox4kc.com. I also have my personal email, which is mikeapple226@gmail.com. So you can reach me either way. I'll be happy to share any experience I've had in the last 3 or 4 months with everything going on in the industry, or share any of the experience I've had in the last 35 years. So call me anytime, text me, or you can, email me, you can text me. I can give you my cell phone number once we communicate through email. I'll be available.
Well, Mike, thank you again for your insight on the chip manufacturing as we solve the mystery today around hurry up, make those chips. And every time I say that, it makes me crave Mexican food and chips and salsa. I don't know about you, but that's exactly where my mind goes. So thank you.
I wish it were that easy. I wish it were that easy.
I know, right?
Order some chips. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. For my next episode on Fox, my next episode will feature Lindsay Wells Pitt, who is the Director of Digital Sales in Indianapolis. She is with Fox 59 and CBS 4, and we're going to be talking about the challenges that local businesses are facing and the tools that you can use to remedy some of those challenges. So that will be our focus of our next show. In the meantime, if you've got a mystery that you would like for us to solve, please email me, submit that mystery to be solved on a future broadcast. Email me at mwest@nexstar.tv and put Marketing Detective in the subject line. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today on the Marketing Detective. We'll be back 2 weeks from today with another episode. So until next time, I'm Mitch West.